They don't storm in with anger, they slip in with charm. The most dangerous people you'll meet aren't loud. They're calculated. They'll smile, flatter, and mirror your values until you no longer recognize yourself. That's how evil works. It confuses, not confronts. And by the time you feel the damage, it's already deep. This video is your defense. Rooted in Stoic philosophy, we'll uncover how to spot manipulation before it sinks its claws in. You'll learn why unease is a signal, why words mean nothing without patterns, and how clarity, not tolerance, is your greatest weapon. The Stoics didn't teach us to endure everything. They taught us to see everything clearly. If you've ever felt drained after being around someone nice, this is for you. Like the video if you're ready to reclaim your mind, and subscribe for weekly Stoic tools to protect your peace. Because in a world of quiet predators, wisdom is your shield.
Number 1.
Trust your intuition. Evil doesn't always announce itself with chaos. More often, it arrives calmly, disguised as charm, reason, even warmth. That's why the first and most important warning sign isn't found in what a person says, but in how your body responds after being around them. You might not have hard evidence, but you'll feel it. A heaviness in your chest, a fog in your mind, or a strange exhaustion that doesn't match the moment. Stoics called this internal faculty prohairesis, your moral and rational center. When that center feels disturbed, that discomfort is not your enemy. It's your earliest form of truth. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminded himself to observe not just the outside world, but the signals within. He believed the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So ask yourself, what color does your mind take on after interacting with someone? Do you leave the conversation feeling clear, or do you walk away questioning your sanity? Intuition isn't emotional fluff, it's sharp. It's your subconscious analyzing micropatterns. Facial tension that contradicts kind words, smiles that never reach the eyes, praise that lands as performance rather than care. Stoics never said to ignore feelings. They said to interrogate them. Intuition in this light is a form of insight. It catches what your logic hasn't yet assembled. And yet the modern world trains us to override the system. We're taught to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to suppress our unease in the name of being reasonable. But manipulation thrives in hesitation. It doesn't need to overpower you. It just needs you to doubt your own compass. The moment you abandon your inner signal to keep the peace, you begin losing yourself. Not all evil wants to destroy you. Some evil simply wants to erode you slowly. Your clarity, your confidence, your connection to what is real. Seneca warned that subtle corruption is the most dangerous kind, not the brute force of obvious evil, but the quiet erosion of judgment, the small compromises, the soft gaslighting, the feeling of being generous while being drained. In his letters he wrote, "He who does not know what the world is, does not know where he is." If you don't learn what evil feels like, internally, you won't recognize it until it's embedded in your daily life. So what should you do when that signal flashes? Don't rush to explain it away. The Stoics taught that clarity is born in stillness. Sit with the discomfort. Don't jump to conclusions, but don't silence the signal either. Ask yourself, why do I feel smaller after being around this person? Why do I hesitate to speak? Why does their presence cloud me instead of clearing me? If your peace is always the price, the relationship is already draining your soul. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." But consent is rarely allowed, yes. It's a quiet series of self-betrayals. Every time you pretend you're fine, every time you ignore your nervous system to keep harmony, she learned to judge people not by their image, but by how she felt after being in their company, empowered or diminished. She wasn't cruel, she was clear. Now consider Epictetus. He taught that freedom begins with mastering your mind. If someone succeeds in provoking you, he said, realize your mind is complicit. But provocation isn't always aggressive. Sometimes it's subtle, a tone that makes you second-guess yourself, a compliment laced with control, a relationship that makes you shrink instead of grow. And your job isn't to explode, it's to notice. That alone can save you. The ancient Stoics believed that self-trust was the root of self-protection. If you can't believe your own inner warnings, you'll forever depend on others to tell you what is real. And by the time they do, it's often too late. Here's what people forget. Intuition isn't emotional chaos. It's pattern recognition. It's what the Stoics practiced through premeditatio malorum, preparing for unseen harm, not to be paranoid, but to stay free. If someone consistently clouds your peace, you don't need a dramatic betrayal. The pattern itself is proof. Some people will drain your focus while calling it love. Others will distort your truth while wearing kindness as a mask. But your soul knows, and the more you ignore it, the more damage you allow. Stoic strength isn't about enduring every situation. It's about discerning which ones deserve your endurance in the first place. That whisper in your chest, that resistance you feel but can't explain, that's not your flaw. It's your filter. Honor it, because once you silence it long enough, you'll forget what real peace even feels like. And that is when manipulation wins. Listen to it every time.
Number 2.
Observe patterns, not words. Words are easy. Words are rehearsed. Words can be shaped, trimmed, and tailored to make you feel safe. But patterns? Patterns are harder to fake. If you want to truly see someone's nature, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they repeat. Not once, not twice, but over time. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology. Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Meaning you are not what you claim, you are what you consistently choose. This is not just wisdom, it's protection. Because the most dangerous people are not the ones who lie out loud. They are the ones whose actions slowly drift from their words until you no longer know which version of them is real. Let's be honest, anyone can apologize. Anyone can promise change. But change is not a statement. It's a sustained shift in behavior. And when someone's words are generous, but their patterns are selfish, that's not confusion. That's clarity trying to get your attention. The reason so many people stay trapped in toxic dynamics is because they trust speeches over patterns. But manipulation always hides in the gap between intention and action. You don't need a degree in psychology to spot truth. You need silence. You need time. You need discipline. A manipulator thrives on urgency, fast connection, rushed intimacy, sudden declarations. Why? Because time exposes repetition. Time reveals the inconsistency between their declared values and their lived reality. That's why the Stoics taught temperantia, self-restraint. When you slow down, when you let people reveal themselves instead of believing what they project, you reclaim power. Consider this. If someone constantly speaks about loyalty, but gossips freely, their pattern is betrayal. If they say they value honesty, but twist stories when under pressure, their pattern is deception. And if they tell you how special you are, but disappear when you need them most, their pattern is abandonment. Words can be memorized, but patterns don't lie. One of the clearest modern examples is Oprah Winfrey. In her early years, she was surrounded by people who claimed to support her vision. Many gave kind advice, warm encouragement. But over time, she realized those who truly stood with her showed up when it was inconvenient, not just when it was glamorous. She once said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." That's not cynicism, that's discernment. A Stoic might rephrase it. When someone's pattern contradicts their promise, trust the pattern. Even Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, applied this principle in private life. He didn't just judge senators or advisors by their words. He watched how they responded under pressure. He observed who remained composed in hardship, who kept their virtue when no one was watching. His journal is filled with reflections not about grand speeches, but about character revealed through consistent choices. One line stands out. You must become an expert in human behavior, not their masks. And here's where many fall. We keep giving people credit for good intentions. But the Stoics would argue, intention without action is self-deception, especially when the cost of believing someone is your own peace. If you find yourself constantly giving people the benefit of the doubt, constantly explaining away red flags, constantly hoping they'll return to the version they once showed you, pause, you're not seeing the truth. You're clinging to potential. So how do you start observing patterns? Step back. Pay attention to how they treat people they don't need, how they respond when you say no, how they act when they're no longer getting their way. Do they respect your boundaries, or do they negotiate them every time? Do they show up without fanfare, or only when there's something to gain? These are not small details. They're revelations. The Stoic approach is simple. Let time test character. Don't argue with someone's claims. Examine their consistency. Let their history speak louder than their charm. As Seneca wrote, behavior is the mirror in which everyone shows their image. Not words, not charisma. Behavior. And remember, what you tolerate teaches others how to treat you. If you excuse patterns long enough, they become your standard. That's not kindness. That's quiet self-betrayal. You owe no one your trust simply because they talk like they care. That trust must be earned in silence through patterns. And when you finally stop reacting to what people say and start responding to what they do, you become immune to manipulation. You stop being surprised by betrayals. You stop needing explanations. You simply see, and that vision sets you free.
Number 3.
They demand access without responsibility. The most manipulative people don't storm through doors. They slip in quietly. They don't take control all at once. They slowly make themselves indispensable. At first, they're charming, generous, and helpful. They act like they care. But if you pay close attention, there's a pattern. They want full access to your time, your energy, your loyalty, but carry none of the weight that comes with earning it. The Stoics had a word for this kind of imbalance. Injustice, not just in law or politics, but in personal conduct. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The wrongdoer wrongs himself." When someone repeatedly takes more than they give, when they ask for loyalty but offer none, when they demand empathy but lack accountability, that is not connection. That is exploitation. And what makes it dangerous is how slowly it happens. It doesn't look like abuse. It looks like dependence. But it's not love, it's leverage. They want you to answer when they call, but vanish when you're in need. They want forgiveness when they fall short, but hold grudges when you do. They expect you to accommodate their emotions, but avoid managing their own. This imbalance is subtle, but powerful. And if you're not conscious of it, you'll find yourself over-explaining, overperforming, and undervaluing your own boundaries just to keep the peace. Stoic philosophy teaches us to examine dynamics, not just emotions, Epictetus said. First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That includes deciding who earns access to your life. You cannot control another person's choices, but you can control your door. You decide who gets to borrow your time, and more importantly, who must return it with respect. Oprah Winfrey once said, "You teach people how to treat you." Many forget, teaching isn't verbal, it's structural. If someone repeatedly takes and suffers no consequence, you're training them to keep taking. They're not confused. They're consistent. They've learned you won't enforce a limit, and that silent permission will cost you peace. A Stoic doesn't respond with rage, but with structure. Seneca warned that tolerating injustice turns you into its accomplice. If someone borrows your kindness but never repays it with integrity, you don't need revenge. You need distance. That's what the Stoics meant by living in accordance with nature. Nature doesn't cling to what depletes it. It renews itself. It protects its core. Consider Maya Angelou. She once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them." But she didn't stop there. She walked away. When people demanded her presence but gave no support in return, she didn't retaliate. She realigned. She didn't become bitter. She became clear. And here's what's crucial. People who demand access without responsibility often use guilt as a tactic. They'll call you selfish for setting limits, cold for creating space, unfair for expecting mutual effort. But guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It's often the residue of conditioning, especially if you were taught that love means self-sacrifice, or that loyalty means tolerance without limits. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches that self-respect is not selfishness. It's sanity. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not your task." That includes the task of carrying emotional weight for those who refuse to carry their own. And one more thing. If someone resents your boundaries, they were never invested in your freedom, only their access. So how do you respond? Not with drama, not with long explanations, but with silence and clarity. Don't announce your boundaries. Live them. Don't beg for reciprocity. Observe the lack of it. When someone treats your energy like an endless resource, your withdrawal becomes the most honest response. Relationships must be reciprocal, or they become quiet rituals of depletion. If someone constantly takes without showing up, if they rewrite the past to excuse the present, if they make you feel guilty for needing peace, what you're experiencing isn't love, it's dependence disguised as connection. You don't owe access to anyone simply because they were once close, or kind, or familiar. What matters is now. And if the present moment is marked by imbalance, it is not cruelty to correct it. It is wisdom. They may call it cold, but clarity always feels cruel to those who benefit from your confusion. Don't apologize for protecting your energy. Don't shrink to make others more comfortable. And don't mistake access for intimacy. One can exist without the other. Detach, restructure, reclaim. Because access is not love, it is a privilege. And when it's not honored, it must be revoked.
Number 4.
Clarity is your defense. The greatest threat to your peace is not hatred. It's confusion. Not the chaos outside, but the fog within. A manipulator's real weapon isn't yelling or insults. It's ambiguity. Because once you stop trusting what you see, what you feel, what you remember, you'll start reaching for someone else's version of reality. That is how they win, not by force, but by distortion. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." That's the Stoicism at its sharpest. Truth is not just a moral ideal, it's a shield and confusion. That's the crack in it. If someone can get you to question your own instincts, they can plant their version of the truth inside you. And if they control the truth, they control the frame. And if they control the frame, they control you. This isn't just theory, it's emotional reality. Manipulators are rarely obvious. They smile while they blur your memory. They comfort you while undermining your clarity. They act confused when you confront them, so that you end up questioning yourself instead. They don't deny things directly. They ask just enough questions to make you uncertain. One moment, they validate your boundary. The next, they accuse you of being selfish. It's not a mistake, it's a method. Epictetus said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." And this is what the manipulator exploits. They don't change what happened, they change what you think it meant. They twist words, reorder events, reframe motives. So you end up apologizing for things you didn't do, defending boundaries you were never wrong to set, and feeling exhausted without knowing why. That's not conflict, that's psychological erosion. So where does a Stoic draw the line? In clarity, not in rage, not in debate, but in clean internal alignment. You don't need to win the argument. You need to hold the line of truth, your truth, because when someone consistently makes you feel smaller, uncertain, and foggy after every conversation, that's not connection, that's control. Let's bring this into the modern world. Taylor Swift, an artist constantly in the public eye, once shared that the hardest part of public life wasn't the criticism, but the distortion. People didn't just attack her, they attacked her intention. They twisted narratives so frequently, she began to doubt her own motives, until she withdrew, restructured her space, and reclaimed her clarity. "There's strength in knowing when to disappear," she said. That was not weakness, that was discipline, that was apatheia. Seneca echoed this with his wisdom. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. If you scatter your attention across everyone's opinion of you, you'll dissolve your sense of self. A Stoic anchors their attention. They protect their mental territory because they know the clearer you are, the harder you are to manipulate. And here's what people miss. Confusion doesn't always feel hostile. It can come dressed as concern, as softness, even as love. But if every time you walk away from someone, you feel smaller, not safer, shrunk, not seen, then something is off. You're not overreacting. You're being undone. So how do you defend your clarity? First, trust your inner signals, Marcus said. If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. If it's not clear, don't believe it. If someone's words contradict their actions, trust the contradiction. Don't let guilt override your intuition. Manipulators feed on guilt because it weakens clarity. They know you'll doubt yourself before you ever doubt them. Second, stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. That's a game you'll never win. And every time you play it, you abandon your own clarity just to prove you're not the villain in their story. You don't owe proof of your integrity. You owe yourself peace. And third, repeat this truth until it becomes instinct. Love should not confuse you. Real love might challenge you, but it won't erode you. It won't twist your perception or make you feel crazy for asking for honesty. Clarity is the foundation of healthy connection. Manipulation thrives in its absence. So if someone makes you feel like your memory can't be trusted, your feelings aren't valid, or your reactions are always over the top, stop explaining. Step back, recenter, realign. Clarity is not selfish. It is sacred, and it is your most powerful defense. The moment you stop needing to be understood and start needing to stay grounded is the moment you become untouchable.
Number 5.
Endurance is not a virtue in abuse. Stoicism teaches us to endure hardship, but it never teaches us to glorify suffering without reason. There's a profound difference between being strong and being stuck, between discipline and self-betrayal. Yet in toxic relationships, many people confuse the two. They mistake loyalty for tolerance, silence for virtue, and suffering for love. Let's be clear. Enduring abuse is not stoicism. It's trauma reenacted. When you stay in a harmful situation thinking you're being noble, what you're really doing is abandoning yourself. You become the protector of someone else's chaos while neglecting your own peace. That is not courage. That is collapse disguised as commitment. Marcus Aurelius never said, "Remain where you are being harmed." He said, "If it is not right, do not do it." If it is not true, do not say it. To endure what violates your inner code is not stoic. It's delusional. Pain is not proof of strength. Knowing when to walk away is, and this is exactly what manipulators count on. They know you were taught to be patient, forgiving, and steadfast. So they weaponize those virtues. They trap you in cycles of harm, followed by just enough kindness to keep you hopeful. But this is not healing, it's control. The cycle itself is the manipulation, and the longer it goes unrecognized, the more it erodes you from the inside out. Epictetus warned, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." If you already believe that staying is a sign of strength, you won't question the pain. You'll call it endurance. You'll believe that leaving means weakness, when in truth it's clarity. Look at Tina Turner. For years she endured an abusive relationship, believing tolerance was love. She thought if she just stayed strong enough, things would change. But one day she left, with nothing but a bus ticket and 36 cents. That wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. Her true strength wasn't in how long she stayed. It was in the moment she chose to leave. That's stoic courage in motion, not passive endurance, but conscious separation, not silence, but alignment with truth. So why do people stay? Because the mind spins stories to justify pain. Maybe I caused it. Maybe they'll change. Maybe I'm overreacting. But these aren't insights, they're echoes of gaslighting. When someone has distorted your perception long enough, you confuse emotional survival with moral duty. But Stoicism says, you are responsible for your own mind, Marcus reminds us. You have power over your mind, not outside events. That means you have power over what you normalize, what you accept, what you endure, and what you decide is no longer acceptable. Endurance without self-respect becomes a prison. You silence yourself to keep the peace. But it's not peace, it's paralysis. Stoicism isn't about feeling nothing. It's about clarity over chaos, including the guilt that manipulative people weaponize against you. That kind of guilt is not conscience, it's conditioning. Leaving is not betrayal, it's insight. It's the realization that someone who constantly demands your tolerance doesn't want change. They want control, they want access, not accountability. And here lies the danger. When you pride yourself on how much you can endure, you stop asking whether you should. Slowly, your self-worth gets replaced with self-denial. You stop being a person and become a container for their instability. And worse, you start to believe that your suffering is meaningful simply because it's familiar. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But adversity is not the same as abuse. One sharpens you, the other erodes you. One calls you to rise, the other convinces you to stay small and call it strength. So your test is not how long you can endure, but how clearly you can see, not how much you can take, but how soon you can walk. The longer you tolerate what destroys your peace, the more you participate in your own undoing. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't prove love through your suffering, and you don't have to keep bleeding to be considered strong. If a relationship demands your dignity, it's not love, it's emotional captivity. Endurance, then, is not always a virtue. Sometimes it's a red flag, a signal that your strength has been hijacked, that your silence has become complicity, that you've mistaken your ability to endure pain for a reason to stay in it. So remember this. The Stoic endures what must be endured, not what fractures the soul. Strength is knowing the line, and courage is walking away when that line is crossed, even if you walk alone. Number 6, walking away is self-respect. There comes a moment, quiet, resolute, when you no longer feel the need to explain, defend, or hope. You just walk away, not in rage, not in fear, but in clarity. That is not coldness, It's self-respect arriving on time. Too many people stay in places that drain them. They confuse love with endurance. But the Stoics knew better. Marcus Aurelius never said to endure the intolerable. He said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Remaining where your spirit is degraded is not virtue, it's vanity masked as loyalty. You keep thinking love will fix it, that your patience will unlock their transformation, but what you're calling loyalty may actually be fear. Fear of the unknown, of being misunderstood, of losing history, and that fear disguises itself as strength. The longer you hold on, the more you disappear in the process. Marcus also reminded us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your mind is soaked in manipulation, guilt, and chaos, it cannot remain clear. You become what surrounds you. You absorb what you endure, and the longer you stay, the more you shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. Soon you wake up a stranger to your own values. Walking away is not about having a dramatic reason. It's about noticing when your peace no longer feels safe, when your presence becomes performance, when staying feels like erasure. You don't need a final betrayal. You just need the courage to honor your clarity and act on it. There's a false narrative that Stoics are emotionless. In truth, Stoicism is not about suppression. It's about strength through inner alignment. And walking away is not emotional weakness. It's emotional intelligence. It's the moment you stop investing in someone else's chaos at the cost of your own peace. Consider Oprah Winfrey. For years, she kept people in her life who drained her spirit. Eventually, she realized that not all connections are rooted in love. Some are rooted in guilt, nostalgia, or obligation. And she left, not to hurt, but to heal. That wasn't selfish. It was sacred. True freedom, the Stoics say, is choosing what to allow into your mental space. And choosing yourself after years of self-abandonment is not an act of rebellion, it's an act of remembrance. You're not proving your worth, you're preserving it. And what you preserve, you protect, and what you protect grows. Why does it hurt so much to walk away? Because we've been taught that endurance is noble, that love means staying, that leaving means failure. But that's the conditioning manipulators rely on. They depend on your overthinking. They twist your compassion into compliance. They feed on the belief that your value lies in how much you can suffer. But Epictetus warned us, you are not disturbed by things, but by the views you take of them. You're not abandoning them. You're refusing to abandon yourself. You're recognizing that your peace matters more than someone else's comfort with your silence. Walking away is not a punishment, it's a pivot. You're not fleeing. You're returning to your clarity, to your boundaries, to your original self, the one you buried under compromise and silence. Seneca wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as far as you can." That withdrawal isn't selfishness, it's sanctuary. It's the return to peace when the world, or the relationship, has grown too loud to think. And when the noise becomes constant, solitude is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. And here's the truth. Silence teaches louder than speech. When you walk away, you don't need to announce it. Your absence becomes the answer. Your peace becomes the proof. You teach people how to treat you, not by arguing, but by leaving when you're no longer respected. Don't wait for them to understand. Some will call you heartless, distant, or disloyal. Let them. Their opinion was never your home. What matters is that you stopped explaining your worth to those committed to misreading it. You stopped giving your soul to people who only wanted access, not responsibility. Walking away is not betrayal, it's vision. It's the moment you realize love doesn't demand you shrink, that boundaries are not barriers, they're bridges back to self. And if someone only loves you when you're small, apologetic, or tired, that's not love, that's dependency with a mask on. And the longer you tolerate it, the more your light dims to make their shadow comfortable. So walk away, not to prove anything, but to remember everything. To return to the self that knows peace is not a prize you win by suffering. It's a standard you protect by walking. The world will guilt you for choosing yourself, but the Stoic doesn't answer to noise. He answers to truth, and truth often whispers, "This is not for you anymore." Walk calmly, clearly, completely, because when you do, you don't just leave them behind. You step back into the life that never required their approval in the first place. You don't owe your peace to anyone who profits from your confusion. The moment you walk away from manipulation, flattery, or masked cruelty, you reclaim your clarity, and that clarity is sacred. The Stoics never taught us to endure what dishonors the soul. They taught us to stand firm in what we know to be true. So if this video gave you a moment of truth, a breath of space, subscribe. Because every week I'm here to remind you, calm is power, boundaries are wisdom, and your silence is often the loudest answer you'll ever give. Stay clear, stay sovereign, stay free.